Top Secret, United States of America, Navy, July 11th, 1980. The contents of this report are for A-level security status only. No portion of this document may be reproduced for any reason. Lower-level security status personnel are not to be made aware of this document, nor is the public. This document may not be transferred into digital format and cannot be transmitted by electronic means. Failure to comply will be seen as an act of treason, punishable by death without standing trial in any form. Submarine, codename Scorpion. Statement, Johnny Davidson, and sign. Captain Ritter ordered us to turn north to the Arctic Ocean near Greenland to run cold water tests. We were to spend 7 days under the ice before returning to the warmer waters in the Atlantic. The purpose of these tests was not revealed to the crew before or after the voyage. At approximately 0400 hours, on the 7th of the 7th, 1980, the alarm sounded that a large unknown object was in the vicinity of the Scorpion. On radar, it appeared larger than any submarine currently in existence anywhere in the world. Captain Ritter ordered us to run silently as we observed the anomaly. It became clear that the anomaly was approaching us. At approximately 0600 hours, we made physical contact. Radar reported that the anomaly had enveloped the Scorpion. Gauges indicated that we had descended deeper under the water. We reached and passed crush depth minutes after we lost control of the submarine, but the submarine showed no effects common with increased pressure on the hull. It appeared in the same condition as the day we departed from the port. Radar reported strange objects in the water, nothing that appeared dangerous to us. Ritter cancelled the silence. He saw no importance in it. Gauges indicated then that we were ascending to the surface level. Once we reached periscope depth, Captain Ritter used the scope to look around. He did not say what he saw, but it was clear that we had surfaced. With the captain's permission, several crew members exited the submarine to explore the area. I did not leave the submarine during this time. Only 2 of the 12-man exploring team returned. They would not speak of their experiences. Soon after, we were pulled back under the water in the reverse of what had happened. When we finally released, we were alone in our previous position in the Arctic with no trace of the anomaly. 3 days had passed. We returned to port immediately. Statement, Brian Cox, Petty Officer. We went into the Arctic Ocean and under the ice on 07/06/1980 without any issue. The following day, at approximately 0500 hours, radar saw an unidentified underwater object in the vicinity of the Ghost. The UUO made contact with the Scorpion at approximately 0600 hours and dragged the submarine deep. Captain Ritter ordered silent running, but the event prevented the men from carrying out that order. Ritter cancelled the order before the submarines reached crush depth. When we began ascending, engineering reported that they weren't able to power the propellers. Once we reached periscope depth, Captain Ritter looked around. He didn't say what exactly he saw, though he did say, "Jesus Christ, what is this place?" With permission from the captain, a party, including myself, was able to explore the area around the submarine. The unknown place had breathable air, though it was thin and sometimes hard to breathe. Samuels, who had asthma, couldn't do much. It was a humid place, reminiscent of the Gulf of Mexico. It was a place unlike anything I have ever seen. There was foliage that I did not recognize, and the very landscape appeared alien to me. The sky was odd. It did not look like the same space seen from the surface of Earth. I stayed with Samuels when his asthma slowed him down. I spent my time looking at the surrounding foliage, as Samuels had himself in a small cave. The plants were unlike anything I'd ever seen before, though I admit my experiences in the town of Moros didn't make me very worldly. Still, I read National Geographic whenever I could, and none of the green that surrounded our small camp was ever in those pages. What looked almost like a rosebush had the head of a Venus flytrap, which watched us like a snake hunting its prey before finally striking. and the vines that crawled up the rock wall behind me around Samuel's shook as if nervous. It all seemed strange to me. After what seemed like an eternity, I saw Fielding running towards me. He was coming down a hill, and from my position I could see him stumble as he ran, but he always kept his feet under him. I do not know what the others experienced. He was in panic and ushered me to flee. My regret, Samuel's was still alive when I left him, though those vines had moved closer to his hiding hole, as though they intended to strangle him. After we returned to the Scorpion, the submarine was dragged back under the water. It was much more violent than our original trip, and when we sunk deep, I could feel the pressure building as if we'd really gone below crush depth. Once released, we were able to return to port. 3 days had passed, though I can't fathom where they had gone. Statement: Corey Fielding, Petty Officer. Captain Ritter ordered us under the Arctic ice to run drills, though he wasn't specific. He armed the torpedoes, which I thought were dummies, though he seemed confident that they were live. We made wide turns around the same area, as if circling something we couldn't see. Ritter kept an eye on us, never retiring to his cabin, as would be expected of him. At approximately 0300 hours on 07/07/1980, the Scorpion entered the vicinity of an unknown object. I say that we entered the vicinity because it remained stationary throughout the observation. The Scorpion moved into the object's path. Ritter directed us towards it. I feared an imminent collision, but nobody else on the crew appeared to share my nerves. Whatever it was, it dragged the submarine deeper until we passed crush depth. Despite several attempts, we were unable to get free of the object, like it wrapped itself around us in a tight hold. Only later did I learn the truth. When we rose, it was not the same place we had been. Captain Ritter used the periscope once we were at the appropriate depth, mumbling under his breath. I don't wish to know what he saw, or what looked back at him through the scope. With the captain's permission, a small group was formed to explore the unknown area around the Scorpion. The first fact, we could breathe air, although it was thinner, like we were at higher altitude. It was also hot, though I would not say humid. I was joined by Cox, Samuels, Nero, O'Connor, Warden, Westbrook, Saluki, Mahoney, Ryder, Yax, and Bishop. Cox and Samuels stopped halfway through our trip. Samuels complained about asthma, though I've never seen him show any signs of asthma before. I think he feared climbing the hill before us. It was like walking through a wild forest, with only a small path to follow. The submarine had risen in what looked like a pond, though oddly the water was frozen into ice. We've brought the Arctic back with us, or so it seemed. I saw several large tentacles wrapped around the hull, holding it in place. It was like an octopus holding a fish right before consuming it. At the time, I couldn't see anything else of the object holding the submarine. The 10 of us followed the path until we came to a ruined city, like those built by the Mayans. It looked long abandoned. Some humanoid skeletons were visible. I don't want to say human, because they weren't. Over 7 feet tall with thick brows and long limbs. There was some twisted artist's imagination of what we were beneath skin and muscle. We headed towards a high pyramid that seemed to be the centre of the city. Like the rest of the city, it looked abandoned, with those strange vines like those where Cox and Samuels had stopped, growing up it, reclaiming it for the horrid jungle. We had to climb the steps to a small temple on the apex. It wasn't easy. By the time we finally reached the temple, we were covered in sweat. The walk took us several minutes. Waiting inside was an elderly man. He had wide eyes and was covered in more tattoos than clothing. He spoke some language that I have never heard before and pointed to a balcony. He was in the act of performing an odd dance around a pit of fire, roasting a humanoid being. I was too disgusted to stay in the man's presence, so willingly I followed my comrades onto the balcony. From it we could see the submarine in the pool. Far in the distance, from more than 10 miles, I don't recall walking. I noticed that the Scorpion seemed free, though the land just east of the pond was destroyed, as if something large had passed through that way. The man started saying one word repeatedly, loud and clear. so that we could understand. I never imagined that he was summoning something. Leviathan, Leviathan, Leviathan. An indescribable horror wrapped itself around the pyramid, opening its jaws near the balcony. Those same octopus tentacles took hold of the stone structure as the wild man poured sand on the flaming pit. In some strange sense of ecstasy, he heaved the corpse before the creature. Its tongue rolled from the gaping abyss like an anaconda, taking the offering though it was a small compared to its girth. I don't think that it was satisfied because the tongue lashed out at the warden, pulling him to the balcony's edge before we could react. It pulled him in and swallowed him whole, while the man kept saying Leviathan. The abomination was eating the seamen one at a time. It bit down on Nero and O'Connor with a large hawkfish beak and tossed them into the air before snatching them on their descent. It tried the same trick with Saluki, but missed. The doomed man's body crashed into the temple's vine-covered stone surface and exploded. I can't describe it in any other way. We didn't have weapons, so our only chance was to escape. Yax was grabbed by one of the thing's tentacles. Its hooked suckers impaled him and dropped his dead body in the creature's expectant mouth. When we'd run from the temple, it turned its attention to the old man. The crazed man cried out gleefully as the creature's long tongue pulled him in. I wasn't going to stay around any longer to see what else it would do. It let out a roar of anger once we'd passed its immediate reach, though I imagine it still could have caught us with one of its larger tentacles. For some reason it didn't. Maybe it wasn't hungry anymore. At the bottom of the temple waited more humanoids. Uncivilized monkeys wielding wooden spears. They attacked us, maiming several of the men. As the seamen fell to their wounds, which were by no means fatal, the humanoids descended on them and beat them with clubs made from stone. As the grass turned the colour of blood, they began crying out, Leviathan, which made the unspeakable horror turn to them. It swallowed the sacrifices as well as a few of the humanoids, but it spit out their bones, knocking a couple of the warriors unconscious. The creature, which I've taken to be the Leviathan, had a large head which was mostly a mouth with eyes. It had a snake-like body, and the lower portion of it was split into more than a dozen tentacles, longer than the scorpion. 4 of us survived the initial attack by the monkeys, but 3 were taken down by the uncivilized brutal attacks before we'd reached the relative isolation of the forest. I couldn't see the creature, though in my nightmares I think it chased us. When I reached Cox, I pulled him back to the scorpion. Samuels appeared to be alive, but decayed like a skeleton. A few vines had grabbed hold of him and were leeching the life from the man. I never looked back to see if we were pursued, though I heard the crashing sound of something large breaking through trees. I was stunned to see the monster already sliding back into the pond and grabbing the scorpion. It had finished its meal and was turning to the cold cylinder to the Arctic. When we reached the submarine, it was pulled back under the water violently and returned to the Arctic Sea. After we had control of the scorpion, Ruta turned us back to the port. 3 days had passed during the incident. Further recommendations. The crew of the Scorpion saw things they weren't authorized to witness, violating the code of clearance, forfeiting their lives. The Scorpion is to be decommissioned and destroyed. Pieces are not to be sold or reused in the construction of future submarines or any other vessel. The crew of the Scorpion will be separated and they will be terminated in whichever ways are most convenient. No US vessel is ever to enter the region that the Scorpion reported this incident to have occurred. Okay, so now we go into the second part of this video, which is the analysis of this creepypasta. So the general design of this story is that it's in the form of a report, some kind of government report. You know, that sort of classified documents vibe. To give a quick summary, this submarine was just going along and it got sucked into some kind of whirlpool and ended up in I guess some kind of different dimension. The reason isn't made exactly clear, but that just adds to the mystery of it. But it seems like some kind of portal to this weird primitive place where they have sacrifices, because the people seem very primitive. He actually describes them as monkeys with spears and stuff, which is quite interesting. The monster itself, or the Leviathan, seems to resemble a semi-aquatic creature. It's big, as tentacles and a big mouth, so pretty standard issue there. And as far as entertainment, it was pretty decent. It captivated me. The ending was quite depressing and bleak, reminded me a lot of The Mist, as we find out the survivors were actually killed. Is this realistically? Whilst the document seems pretty authentic, I doubt they looked at the exact protocols and stuff. From a brief bit of research, the submarine terminology they used seems to be quite accurate, and it wasn't too intense that you didn't understand the story. Like, if they started using some really technical terms, that would have just thrown me out. But it kept me reading throughout. I'm giving this one a decent 7 out of 10. Let me know in the comments below what you think. If you want to read this story for yourself, the link is in the description. Make sure to like the video if you want to see more like this where I read stuff. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe for more creepy content.